Hey, I'm going to make a video of something really extraordinary. And I've been in this power business for over 30 years, and this is really making me fall out of my chair. Sitting here today, looking at my app of ERCOT being the grid operator for Texas, Texas being very special as its own grid operator called ERCOT. California is CAISO, and New York has New York ISO, and the rest of the grid operators tend to be regional. But looking at the app, download the app, ERCOT. I got it in the App Store. What am I seeing? Wind and solar over 50% of the generation on a summer peak day in Texas. It's extraordinary. Well, that solar is very expensive. No, the price is $14 a megawatt hour. 2 or 3 years ago, on a summer day like this, the price would be in the hundreds, like hundreds of dollars. It went from hundreds of dollars to $14, the same summer peak day. So you say, well, there's a little ERCOT's kind of got Texas, but they left the slivers out. So let's just go see what the power is trading for across the street. No, I need my glasses. I've got the MISO, the Midwest operator's got a node in um, LMP prices. So, everything in the power business is an acronym. But don't be put off by it. Okay, right there. I didn't even know what this was. $44. So if you're on one side of the street in Texas, the wholesale market's at $44 because they don't have a lot of wind and solar in MISO. And if you're at the other end of if you're on the other, across street on the other side of the street, you're at $14. So what really brought this to my attention, and I would encourage people to go download these apps because I don't really need to say anything more about this issue ever again. If you just download these apps and make your own opinion, you're going to find that the power prices in ERCOT are a lot less. And you're going to find the power prices right across the street in MISO are a lot more. And so, what really brought my attention to this issue was a couple things. One, there's an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which was, believe me, I've been doing this for a long time. I know exactly what they're talking about. It just, if it ever was true, it is no longer true. Like, you know, when I first got involved so what brought this to my attention was, I'm going to share my screen now. Um, okay. What brought this to my attention was a couple of weeks ago. Um, I read this. I'm not sure I'm sharing the right screen. Share screen. No, yeah, it's just sharing me. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, got it. What was this? It came out in May 2025. So like I read this a couple weeks ago. Um, and I'm just like, I don't know what came into my attention, but I'm like, oh well, that's interesting. I wonder how ERCOT's doing with all this wind and solar that got built. And so, sure enough, the ERCOT has a board of directors and shareholders, and is responsible to the utility commission. So they hire consultants to once a year monitor their market to make sure there's no Enron-ish shenanigans going on. And sure enough, this came out in May. Again, I read it a couple weeks ago. I fell out of my chair. The ratepayers, the customers of power in Texas saved $18 billion between 2023 and 2024 in wholesale market power prices. The price went down 53%. It went down from about $70 down to $34. And I'm not making this up. Like I'm just going to go, and I have to tell you, I am surprised. So kind of as watching this market unfold now, from inception to date, I've paid a lot of attention in ERCOT from time to time, and frankly, I've never really liked working down there because it's a lot all this volatility. It's kind of always scared me away. But what 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 are we looking at? This is there's two pictures that are worth 10,000 words. One are those screenshots of the market power prices. Please just download those apps, do it yourself. Like you don't need to know anymore. But if you do want to know more, this is really the money shot right here because what it says is okay, in 2020 in ERCOT there was COVID, the power prices were low, like they get remember oil prices went to negative barrels, dollars per barrel. You had to, people would pay you to take the oil off your ship. And it was the COVID era. In 2021, man, things went wacko because we were turning the economy back on again and gas prices, natural gas prices spiked, but that's not really what drove these prices up. So the prices for the power, that's the blue part here, the energy without adders was about just eyeballing at $80. And there was an ORDC adder, and of course, again, we got to have an acronyms for everything, but that's basically a reliability adder, so the spinning reserves, if you will. And sometimes you're going to see ancillary services, right? The purple adder. That's kind of for spinning reserves. It's kind of for reliability, but it's a little mostly it's voltage support and other services. So if there's an emergency, the grid has already thought about that and contracted for these services. And then when there's just not enough power plants, that's what you saw in 2021. The ERCOT has to go out and procure whatever they can. And that's the reliability adder. So there's not enough power plants. There's more demand for the power than there is supply. And the ERCOT's got to go out and buy your power from other markets. They've got to go bring units on that otherwise wouldn't be running or whatever they do. But it's all in the price. So when I quote these prices, when I say, you know, $70, 34, almost $200, that includes this reliability. So that includes if you got the solar plants, 53% of solar plants today, that includes the number of gas turbines and stuff they need to keep in standby to, if they had a problem. And they know that the sun sets. And they're dealing with that in Texas now, mostly with batteries. So if you go look at another um, thing on another page on the same app, you'll find how they balanced everything through the previous day. It's right there. It's just another click on there. So what is this saying? This is saying that when we added 14,000 megawatts of new supply, all of it was wind, solar, and batteries. Of the 14,500 what was called 3% was was gas turbine. Um, what happened? Well, what happened was the price cratered. We flooded the market with cheap wind and solar. The market price cratered to $34. What else happened? You look at this 2023 where they broke it out by month. I mean, regular as rain, you could go in and these June, July, August, September, you're going to have blowouts. Well, there's no blowouts. There's no blowouts in 2024. We flooded the market. There's excess wind and solar. Over 50% of the grid, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I just showed you in the app. Um, so what is this telling you? This is telling you that the volatility decreased with the wind and solar on the grid. It's telling you that the overall price decreased. And it's telling you they needed to spend very little money relative to the past on spinning reserves and capacity, buying capacities in case because they were short capacity. Well, that all went to like almost nothing in 2024. In previous years, they spent billions of dollars a year on that stuff. So, wow, this is a case study in what happens when you flood the market with cheap wind and solar and add a few batteries in there, so when the sun goes down, you can ride out the trough. Now, you've got to understand something that I mean, I hear this all the time. I hear it from very smart, well-educated people who are brilliant even. And they say, well, you've got to have the gas the gas power plant or the coal plant or whatever, at standby. You didn't really save any money. It's not true at all. I just showed you these numbers. They're not paying to have stuff in stamp. They don't need it because just go look at the app yourself of how they got through the day. You'll see the wind and solar came online. They used the batteries for a little bit. The things that moves throughout the course of the day, it's not the generation. When the sun comes up, the solar plant goes on. And if it's real cloudy and kind of cold, the demand doesn't go way up. So they're losing a little solar power, but not that much. Because the solar plant works with some clouds. And but they're not they don't have high demand either. Um, so what really drives the grid operator's daily chore is not generation because he already hopes that he has plenty of generation. It's just picking from where at what time. What matters is that peak load. The load matters. And so residential on-site solar, commercial solar, that reduces the load. Well, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Um, and the utility scale solar, which is really what I'm talking about here, that's just flooding the market with cheap power during the day. Well, what's happening during the day? Well, that's when most of your demand is. So, no, I mean, like the solar plants going out of commission in the middle of the nighttime, no one cares because let's say the peak load, give you some real numbers. Go back to the app, put my glasses on, I'll tell you. So the peak demand today was 81,000 megawatts. They've got 109,000 megawatts of capacity. But what I really want to do is go look at this supply demand uh, previous day. Okay, I'm gonna unshare you here. I'm gonna come back at you. Previous day. So you can see they used all the wind, they used all the solar. When they had a little bit of shortage, they just used the batteries for a minute. Um, but but you, in the nighttime, let's say peak demand was 85,000. At nighttime, it's looking like the demand is down to about 65,000. So, like all the solar can go away. It doesn't matter because there's no demand, and the wind is just kind of free energy. Like what and by the way, I don't know if you've ever been to parts of these some of these places in Texas. When you open your car door, hold on to it because if you don't, the wind's going to take it right off. Like it's pretty windy. So they're pretty good at predicting the ERCOT uh, when the wind's going to show up and when it's not in Texas. Um, the other thing I hear, I'm going to share my screen one more time because it's dry. So one thing that drives me nuts is, well, you need to have the units in standby. So that wind and solar power, that yeah, it was cheap, but didn't really matter. Well, no, it matters. It went from $200 to $70 to $35. Like I think it mattered. Um, the other thing that drives me nuts is, well, the retail power price went up. This is like I don't want to quote anybody because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I hear that. And back, I'm going to share my screen. It doesn't matter. Like the retail price is this shiny blue corner, this 20% corner here. Now, if you save $18 billion in that corner, you still save $18 billion. But uh, other than, and that's what happens. It happens to us here in New England, Ryan. All of a sudden, you've got power prices based on LNG and burning liquid fuel in the middle of the winter, and this energy charge goes through the roof, and people's heads explode when they get the bills. Well, in Texas, if this charge goes from $35 back to $200, people's heads are going to explode because this bill's going to go way up, right? But in reality, it's only 20% of the bill when the power prices are low. Of course, the power prices go up, it's going to be a different percentage, right? But so what's causing what's the makeup of your bill? Well, it's the energy. So saving $18 billion is actually saving people money. Um, and the other kind of thing that I've heard was, well, the consumers didn't really benefit. It was all those solar developers, somehow got the benefit. Well, no, the price went from $70 to $34. Like, no, the price went down. So I think the consumers did get the benefit. But what's the rest of this? Sales tax, you got to have taxes, gross receipts, tax reimbursement. That's because the utilities think that they should get paid and have their taxes netted out of this. I'm talking about the people who own the wires, not the generators that own the power plants. So the transmission owners are getting paid over here, and the semi-darkest blue. And then the darkest blue is always my favorite, is the base charge. So it doesn't matter what state you're in, there's always some relatively large pool of money that's very mysterious, where they're just like think it's a good idea to take more money from you, basically. Um, but retail rates in Texas from 2023 to 2024 went up 2.6%. I assure you they would have gone up a lot more if the power price didn't crater. Period. Full stop. I would expect at the end of this year, just looking at power price of $14 in the middle of the day, that the retail price probably the retail price will probably go down. Um, unless there's some nuke bailout or some crazy programs, like people love to stick the ratepayers with. So now I'm going to that's the punchline. The punchline is we had an experiment. What happens when you flood the market with wind and solar? We collected the data. Thank you, ERCOT and Potomac markets or economics. We have an outcome. The data said something. It said the volatility went down, the number of units that we had to go contract with to keep reliability up went down, and the real-time price went down. All in together, the price went down 53% from the previous year. And really, if we didn't have all this wind and solar build, which would still be back up here at $200 price land. So now with a lot of analysis, I could have made these same claims in these other states where there's a lot of wind and solar. California, there's a lot of wind and solar. You say, well, the power price is very high to the retails in California. Well, I don't want to get into why that is, but the wholesale power price is actually pretty low. Kind of, very surprising. Don't fall out of your chair, but Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, South Dakota all get more than 50% of their power from wind power. And no, they don't have like power plants standing, running, running in reserve. That the grid operators, utilities are actually pretty good at dealing with the idiosyncrasies of the wind. I mean, it's considerable, but they're pretty smart guys. Um, so and just go look at these other markets. California, the wholesale power price is really shockingly low, actually. Iowa, Kansas. No, these are places with very low power prices. And so it's not true that these renewables, even at 50% plus penetration, are causing power prices to go up. They're causing power prices to go down. They're causing them to go down a lot. So the reason why I like talking about Texas so much is the market's very transparent. Um, like I said, I'm not sure I love it. It is what it is. Um, but you can observe the power prices. You can go to this report. The all of Texas mostly is in the ERCOT. So it's a big market. It's very visible and observable. And wow, they added a lot of wind and solar, and you just see what happened. Like there's no analysis needed. Um, there are a couple other points now that I made the main point, which is, oh my God, did we save money by putting all this wind and solar on the grid in Texas as well as um, these other states, California and Oklahoma and Kansas, Iowa, South Dakota. I first did land development for wind in South Dakota about 20 years ago. I thought I was wasting my time. Like the guy said, I want to go to South Dakota. I've got some landowner. I said, okay, go to South Dakota. I've got relatives over there. I was totally wasting his time. No, like look at South Dakota, 50% of the thing is wind. So I got to tell you, I didn't foresee a lot of this, the degree to this success. So I mean, even though I'm in the industry, I didn't necessarily. I mean, I always believed it was a good thing. I always believed there was a market for good projects. Uh, and I did know that they were going to lower wholesale market power prices because it's a power source that doesn't have any fuel costs, so they can bid differently than combined cycle units. The other kind of misconception is, okay, you got all this wind and solar, it was subsidized with a tax credit. I want to talk about that. All this tax credit, I'm just going to call it the George Herbert Walker Bush tax credit because that's when it first went in place in 1992. I was in the industry then. I was in Washington, and George Herbert Walker Bush's nephew was my colleague. Um, and um, but we had no idea this was going to happen. We like this has been wow. Like no one at the time thought that this. At the time, we were trying to get these wind turbines to make power at $60. And we couldn't do it. Like we tried, but we yeah, didn't quite get to 60. At that time, solar would have been 250 or $300. Like forget it. Um, and so why has this happened, I guess? Well, one is there is this tax credit. So let's drill into that a little bit. The amount of this wind and solar and batteries that got built was about $18 billion last year. Just a coincidence. The two numbers are the savings and this build number are the same. Um, and about a third of that, or about $5 billion, was the tax credit subsidy. So, like here we saw that tax credit subsidy is simple payback of 3 months. What other investment does the government ever make that is a 3 month simple payback? I like none. So, and then I'm not being hard on the government, like but this is just an extraordinary result. Um, the other thing, so one, the tax credit. I think the price point's totally changed. I mean, even though this renewable sector gets tagged with tariffs and China's the world leader in this. I mean, China, for example, is building more solar in 2025, this year, this very year. There's more plants in China under construction, solar power plants, than we have in the United States than we built in the last 20 years. So they're building the hell out of this. And I don't think the Chinese are building all this, I just got to make a guess, but $300 billion of solar plants this year. I just kind of made that number up, but it's a big number. They're not doing that because like they care about the environment or um that or anything else. Like they're doing that because it's the cheapest thing to do, and they realize they have a problem in the country with the power price being high because they don't have any real indigenous resources other than a bit of coal. And this is really helping them reduce their power price. So the reason why wind and solar has a global market share that's this high, so 90 plus percent of all power plant construction globally and in America is wind and solar. Uh, the reason is largely economic driven. So gone is the story of green energy, like that, this is a good thing. Like those days are gone. This is about economics and lowering the cost of power to the consumer and jobs. I fell out of my chair again when I looked at how many jobs were in the renewable energy sector in Texas in 2025, 900,000 people. It's more than is in the oil and gas business. It'd be a very bad idea for Texans, Republicans, Democrats, all Texans, to slow down the pace of this renewable penetration in that state. It's had an extraordinarily positive impact in lowering the power prices. I mean, they had a real problem on their hands. Fixed the problem, fix it in the lowest cost possible way, and it fixed it really, really quickly. Um, Number two, jobs. 409,000 people. That's 3% of all Texans work in the renewable energy business, and most of it's not manufacturing. It is the construction activities. So when you go look at where does your dollar go, when you buy $1 billion worth of renewables, where does the money go? Most of it goes to most of it's either raw materials, steel or silicone. Some of it is involved in the manufacturing, but not that much. Doesn't really. But the core, there's this core amount of the capital that's just spent installing the systems, flattening the ground, punching the post in the ground, putting the racks up, putting the panels on the, hooking the whole thing together, interconnecting to the grid. All that is local. That's labor. And apparently 900,000 people of labor in Texas in 2025. It's a lot of labor. And the third benefit are local benefits. So I just guess that in Texas, there's a couple $100 billion a year in local property tax payments to municipalities and to local landowners. So yeah, um, it would be a noticeable impact to the Texas economy if they stop building wind and solar in any, really, I don't see any other solution because they're just need the they have load growth. Every 1,000 megawatt data center, that how much that much, I don't know how big that is, 1,000 megawatt data center, like 1,000 megawatts, like if that's one that's like two huge smokestacks and like a really huge 10 acres worth of gas turbine power plant. Like it's a lot of power. um so yeah, there's no way to keep up with this load growth without keeping this train going. And you don't your load growth goes and your generation follow, it doesn't keep up. All of a sudden you're back at $200 a megawatt hour, and 200 is a lot more than 35. So, and there's about 500,000 megawatt hours per year sold in Texas. So it's, that forms your math. I don't think anybody has any idea. I didn't. And, I kind of like, I'm in the power bit, like I kind of watch this. So, I don't think it's a good strategy to be critical of people who didn't know this. Like I've been in this business a long time and I didn't know it. So, and I didn't foresee it. I'm surprised. But shutting down all this wind and solar growth in Texas, for example, as we're talking about, would have a hugely negative impact on the economy. One, the power price is going to go back up. I don't know if it's going to go to 70 or 200 or who knows. Like it's like predicted. Where's my crystal ball? Don't have one here. But it's certainly not going to stay at $35. I'll tell you that. Um, and I mean, next year's number is going to be lower than $35. I mean, look, we just saw like it's crazy. And we have 400, 900,000 people we're going to put on the street. Now, that's the direct head count. If you go fire 409,000 well-paid people, guess what? Guess what happens? You end up with 1 million people out of work. Like like I don't think anybody has any idea. I can tell you, I've been in Texas a lot, and I've seen what happens when the oil industry lets 200,000 people go. Like it's a big problem. So now, just to kind of drone on about some of the other stuff I hear, the big myth that these things is that the standby power units, like, yeah, there's wind and solar, but it's not real. It's not. Well, no, it's 50% of all the power in a bunch of states, including in the middle of the summertime in Texas. Like, this is real power, and it's real reliable power. And because in the reliability assessment, I already told you the main thing is the low growth, but the other thing is there's so many different, each one of these solar plants is a bunch of 6 megawatt boxes. Each turbine is 1 to 5 megawatts of by itself. So what happens when you lose a turbine is you lose 5 megawatts. If you lose a nuke plant, you're down 1,000 all at the same time. So from a reliability perspective, it actually is a good thing to have a whole lot of little ones instead of a couple of really big ones, because you lose those big units and kind of all hell breaks loose. Um, so it's not true that it isn't real power. No, it's real power. It's over 50% of the grid in Texas. Go get the app on a summer afternoon. Um, I talked to you about who benefits. Well, the ratepayers benefit. I understand retail rates are a funky thing. But at the end of the day, when you save $18 billion, the retail people end up saving $18 billion. And uh, the other thing is, yeah, there's tax credits. Um, no question, good thing. It's been responsible for all this, but clearly the ratepayer and the consumer benefited because the power price went from 200 to 70 to $35, and next year it's going to be, I don't know. I mean, it could be as low as $20. Who knows? We'll know at the end of the year. Um, so the tax credits have been a big piece of this, but so like globally, why do you see this? And this wind and solar is just cheaper than the alternatives. It almost everywhere, unless you're sitting. Like I can't even think of an alternative that a case where I mean, if there's no wind and there's no flat land to put solar plants like here in New England, so sorry, we're out of luck. We just got to pay high power prices or build transmission lines so we could like interconnect a cheap wind somewhere or solar. Um, the other thing I get is, oh, all you wind guys, you caused us to build transmission and like that, we're gonna ding you for that somehow. That's complete bullshit. Excuse me. One, as a generator, I can tell you that you get just extorted by the grid operators in these transmission costs to get on the grid. So in reality, the grid operators have been using all this new generators needing to get online and needing to kind of pay whatever extortion they were demanded to go fix a bunch of problems they already had. So, no, I actually think this transmission subsidy has gone the other way. I don't think the wind and solar people have been subsidized by the grid. In fact, I think the wind and solar operators have subsidized changes to the grid that otherwise were necessary anyway. And now all these data centers are showing up, and you start reading, oh, well, who's going to pay for the cost of the generator or the transmission to the data centers? That's actually going to be a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. So you if you build generation, if you build new load, if you just want to sustain the status quo and have your grid operate properly, it just costs money. So, and it's not the case that the wind and solar people have disproportionately been benefited from transmission system upgrades. It's just not factual at all. I could see why people say that. Like I get it. Like, well, there was that line and it cost $300 million and yeah, but it went and got $10 power and brought it to a $50 market. So I don't know. It seems like there's a payback in there somehow, or the guy wouldn't have wanted to build the line to begin with, right? So the next thing is, I got news for you. Absent this tax credit, the price of this solar. So you're just focusing on solar. I don't know, 15 years ago, or let's go back 20 years ago, 15 years ago, like Solyndra, right? Solyndra said, I can go build a solar panel for $2,000. And the polysilicon technology panels made in China are at $4,000. Like I'm a great, I have a different technology like this, really good. I actually never believed that. I met with the guys and I'm like, please tell me your story. And okay, great. What happens when the price of this silicon stuff goes to $1,000? Well, it did go to $1,000 and then it went to 35 cents and then it went to 15 cents. So it was $4,000 or yeah, $4, if you will. $4 went to $2 and now it's at 35 cents. And internationally, we have to pay a tariff. It's at 15 cents. Um, so that really changes the game. And that's why you see globally, everybody building the solar, because it's just the cheapest thing to do. And no, they really don't have all these boogeyman issues that you try to hear. Um, if there wasn't this solar build, and if historically there wasn't the solar build, and prospectively you stop it for whatever reason you want to fire 400,000 people. Um, okay, well, what's going to happen? Nothing. The gas, the gas generation, one, it can't compete with wind and solar. That's one reason why people don't spend a lot of money on it. But the other reason is that the gas units all have a huge credit history. They all went bankrupt or otherwise got restructured. Enron, Reliant Resources, Energy Futures Holding, Calpine, Mirant, Dynegy, Panda, even the private capital people like Panda. These people lost all their money that they had invested in the gas-fired power plants. And so um, I'm not going to go into why, like there's reasons why. I could make a video about that. But so as a result, people's investment experience is really crappy and the market structure, the market design hasn't changed. So whenever I hear people say, well, I want more gas generation, I'm like, it's great. I love gas generation. I think that's wonderful. Why are you changing the market design? No. Okay, well, you can't have any more gas generation. It's like the market that exists 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and today, same market. And it's different, Texas, I mean, all these different regions have subtle differences between the market, but fundamentally, The gas-fired generation didn't work, almost anywhere. Um, there's exceptions to that rule, but like someone can say, "Well, I made money. I got it. I saw you make the money over there." But this is true, kind of as a macro comment. So the only thing that's going to happen, and there's so it's not. And then I see people will change the interconnection rules to get this gas online quickly. I'm like, what difference does it make? Like you could have gotten in the queue and managed this queue process anyway. Um, that's not the constraint. The constraint is there's no gas turbines, there's no supply chain because we haven't built them for over 10 years. And the price point's all wrong. Like other than that, have at it. And you're going to find the gas pipelines in the ground to go put into the gas, the gas power plants. Well, those are all full, and there's not a lot of extra capacity on those. So yeah, that's I'm not against it, but it's just gonna result in 409,000 people out of business in Texas and the power prices go back up. So if that's the problem, like these power plants take, in the case of a nuclear plant, just say be kind and say it takes 10 years. In the case of a gas plant, let's be kind and say it takes 6 to 10 years. These solar plants, like the average solar development cycles 3 or 4 years, other than cases where they decided to restructure the grid rules right in the middle of getting your power plant developed. But that's kind of a one-time thing. Like this grid being the constraint, kind of the last year's problem. Number one, 86% of all projects in the queue historically don't end up online. It has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with the queue or the interconnection. It has to do with the fact that the projects failed. So people put projects in the queue prematurely, and they didn't get site control, they didn't get their local permits, or it was a crappy project to begin with, and it didn't happen. It had nothing to do with whether you got your interconnection agreement or not. I mean, there was a little bit of that going on, but so it's the business so when I go look at the queue and the queue's all full, and I'm like, I don't even pay attention to that because I know that 86% of that stuff is nonsense. Um, so there really is no like easy solution here. That's a very complicated sector. Um, it doesn't really wear well in a tweet. I'll tell you what does tweet these screenshots. It's remarkable. But other than that, you end up droning on like me for way too long about all these details. I did read this July 2025 DOE resource adequacy report. I guess this press release about this. Oh, came to the stunning conclusion we need a lot more power plants in America. I completely agree. I think we need some gas plants too. Like I'm not like being ideological about this. But we need like let's figure out how to get 10 or 20,000 megawatts gas power online. But don't you know, the only thing that's going to prevent a disaster is keeping this wind and solar build going. Now, the other thing people say is, well, if they're good projects, like they'll happen without the tax credit anyway. I agree. I've said that before. I said it in writing. But not at the volume to keep the power price going from 70 to $35, it won't happen. And not keeping 409,000 people employed, it won't happen. So will the good projects, the best projects still go forward? Yeah. Will these projects in markets like ERCOT go forward? I don't know. I don't really, not at the scale necessary to keep power prices low. I'll tell you that. So I've always said, I know the power market in the US, the market structure doesn't work. The fully regulated structure doesn't work. Won't want to get into that. The deregulated structure doesn't work. I told you all the bankruptcy histories. What does work is renewables with the tax credit. So is it perfect? No. Neither of the alternative market structures are perfect either. Does it result in results? Yes. So it's not perfect. It's not ideal. it just has an outcome that in Texas saved $18 billion last year and looks like now relative to that benchmark of 2023, for example, is going to save a hell of a lot more than that. And and more than 50% of the power and like place like Iowa is like 80%. So like when people say this wind power like doesn't work, it's not real power. It's like 80% of the power in the state comes from wind power. They were an early adopter. Um, okay, I wrote an article about this. I'll get it published and I'll post the link in the in below. I hope people stop being ideological about this. I mean, I'm on both sides actually, and download this app and tell people the good news that they just saved a lot of money and a lot of their constituents are working in this sector. Like that's the news that we need to convey. And I don't think anybody gives a shit about climate change. I mean, I kind of do, but uh, no one else. No, I assure you, people don't really care. They do care about the saving $18 billion. And they care about 409,000 people being at work. Like people care about that. So that's really my message of the day. I was astounded when I started looking at these apps over the last couple of weeks. And when I read this market report, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I mean, it's I assure you, kind of standing from the point of view of the emergence of this industry, no one would have believed in any of this. And so it's a huge, huge success story. And we should thank people for that because there have been a whole lot of people from both parties that have been instrumental to this. Uh, Thank you for listening.